Okay, good evening. Today is Monday, March 6, 2023. This meeting is a Finance Subcommittee meeting. Madam Secretary, can you make a roll call?
Chairperson Lang?
Here.
Mr. Rossi?
Here.
Ms. Doherty? 2 present, 1 absent.
Okay, today we have a knowledge bowl which still one of our members. Thank you, Eileen, for canceling your appearing as a judge at the knowledge bowl, so that you can join the subcommittee tonight. Madam CFO, would you like to start the presentation today?
So the first thing on the agenda is the payment of delayed bills or payment of bills from previous years. Just so you know, I did hear that there is I don't know if it was an official motion, but that you requested a comparison between years, and I can definitely do that. The thing to point out right now, until I do that, I don't know if it's a formal motion or not, but we have improved. When I first began, there were a lot of bills that did not have purchase orders or bills that we didn't receive the invoices. And in this particular case, we do have $298,000 of bills from previous years. But fortunately, there's only one, which is the one on the bottom, which is one bill for $1,039. It's one bill that is delayed due to ordering without a purchase order. So that's the one bill that we did that was a mistake on the school department's part. The other 2 types of bills that are included in this delayed bill payment this year are bills delayed due to legal obstacles. So there are conflicts between laws, and we still don't have a resolution, and we have made several attempts to work with the previous solicitor and now the new solicitor. For instance, the McKinney-Vento demands that we transport homeless students immediately to avoid disruption to their education, but that violates contract and 30B laws because you're supposed to go out to bid and do all that. If we actually had to wait and advertise, go out to bid, then go through the contract process, the student may not go back to get transported for several weeks to a couple of months. So we have 2 bills under bills delayed due to legal obstacles. One is a special ed transportation law, one is a special ed transportation bill for $14,865. The other is a homeless transportation bill for $110,204. The other type of bill that is on this delayed bill list is bills delayed due to premature canceling of purchase orders. I've been here 4 years now. There's been 4 different auditors, and each time we get a new auditor, we face whether they're the issue of whether they're going to cancel purchase orders or not. In this particular case, there were some purchase orders canceled that should not have been, and they're listed there. They include the highest one would be $140,000 CATV middle school auditorium upgrades. The purchase order was canceled before any of the invoices were received. So we did everything the right way going through the purchase order process, but when the purchase order was canceled and the bills came in after, now we have to bring this forward in front of the City Council. We do have the funding still. It's just a matter of going through the formality of Chapter 44, Section 64. So as Ms. Martin, this is what you had requested that we do for now on, bring it in front of you guys so that you're notified, and we can then proceed with bringing it in front of the City Council. I don't know, does it require a vote or just to notify you?
No, it requires a vote.
Okay, so okay, so can we vote? I mean, can a vote take place?
The subcommittee can vote, but it doesn't mean anything.
Oh, so
It's a vote of the school committee.
Okay.
And I'm not on the subcommittee.
Okay. So just notify you and then bring this forward to the school committee meeting too?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So then if you have no questions with the okay, go ahead.
Almost made it. You almost made it the whole time without saying bad bill.
I almost did.
Almost
Thank you.
did.
Thank you.
Could I have a couple of questions, Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
Dave. The first question I would say is, when we're looking at the cancellation of the purchase orders, so were they I'm sorry, thank you. So were they canceled June 30th, and then the bills came in after that?
Not necessarily June 30th. It could have occurred anytime in July or August. So yes, but it was.
But after the
Yes.
fiscal year end?
Right.
Okay. My only other question would be, now, when we're looking at the special ed charges, I understand you're saying there's a conflict between the two laws, but I was under the impression that we don't need to go out to bid for special education transportation.
So homeless transportation, which is the one that's up here with the legal obstacle, it's the special ed transportation, that one was just a delay with the law department, right? The homeless transportation, here's the part that needs to be ironed out with the government, and we have notified them of the complexity of this situation. Homeless is considered regular ed transportation, so it's not exempt. So because it's not exempt, and the problem with it, and we tried to work with the new auditor and the past auditor on this, is we don't know when we're going to get a homeless student.
Exactly.
And then if we did get a homeless student, we can't, when we go out to bid, what do we say to a vendor? You might have 2 kids on the day 1 and 5 kids on day 60. They're not going to hold the spots open on their routes for us, so it's first come, first serve. So it's a very complex situation, and we were trying to work with we called J. Lang, we called Worcester and Brockton to see how they do it, and they don't even do contracts. They actually do purchase orders as the contract, an open purchase order with a vendor. But our new auditor and law department, they haven't agreed to that yet, but we are in the process of working with it. I did meet with the city CFO, and he gave an idea of going out to bid at the beginning of the year and getting a per mile rate, and if they are available, then fine, we can proceed. So we are trying to remedy this situation.
Which is honestly the same thing I'd recommended for the cleaning issues when we have, major things, to kind of have a contract already determined.
yes.
So is we can't be the only district dealing with this.
No.
Okay.
As we did, John Dakota reached out again to Jay, Worcester, and Brockton, and they all said that it's so difficult to go through a contract or bidding process at the beginning of the year, and then when you don't know how many students or randomly they could,
Where they're coming from? Or
right.
Exactly.
Like, how does a vendor bid on something when they don't know how far the student's going to be transported, or, yes, we don't know.
I mean, the only solution is to treat them as special ed the same way we treat special ed requests. But anyways, okay, so my only other question, so I did ask for the total. So this is the 298 for this year.
Yeah.
I had asked as part of that motion to get the total from last year. So if we could get that information for the regular school committee meeting, when we'll be voting on to move these forward to the council, that would be great.
Was it put on the motion list yet? Was it a formal motion? Because
I made it during the meeting.
Okay, I wasn't at that meeting. That was the
Okay.
one I wasn't there, and I just heard after the
Okay.
fact that you had asked for. I think it was you that told me that it was requested. So yes, I'll definitely prepare that.
Perfect, that would be great. Thank you.
Yep. Oh, I'm sorry. So if you don't mind, I would like to do number 3 before number 2, being that just because number 3, the budget update actually leads into it. I'll go through it quickly, being that it's all stuff that we've discussed before, but just the superintendent likes me to include certain slides just so that it shows, has a message for those that are just reading it for the first time.
Madam CEO, may I ask one question before we move on?
Sure.
On the CATV 140,000, can you run it by me one more time? Is it canceled, but we still have to pay, or is that?
It wasn't that the work was canceled, it's that the purchase order, so a purchase order is a way of saying we're committing this money for this project. But when they canceled the purchase order inadvertently, and we hadn't paid the bills yet. So when the bill came and there wasn't a purchase order to apply it against, now it's considered a bill from a previous year.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
So like I said, if I can go to number 3, which is the budget update, that would be a nice prelude to the failed student funding thing. The first slide is just a budget calendar. I'm not going to read all that. I'm just going to remind everyone that we typically get the governor's numbers at the end of January, and we ended up getting them last week, which is a 5-week delay. So I typically have all of February to work on the governor's numbers and the school site budget books. We've had 1 week, so it's been very crazy. But the next thing to let you know on this, the only other thing on this calendar to point out to you is that with presenting this tonight. We hope to release these budget documents tomorrow so that the schools are not impacted by the governor's delay. I also want to point out, too, that the deputy CFO had left, was recruited by our previous Linus Guillory. He recruited him, Tam. So we didn't have a deputy CFO who is the one that did the technical stuff with the algorithm for the last couple of years. And then the consultant, because of all of the ESSER money funding pouring into the schools, they're overbooked. So they're not able to assist us. So we have been trying to figure out macros and algorithms, and we're accountants. So it's been slow going, but we're really hoping to release these tomorrow. And we're hoping that with all the enrollment increases, none of the schools lose any funding. The next slide is just showing you, it's not relevant now, but it was a projection of the Student Opportunity Act increase. You, Ms. Martin, you had asked us to project out how much we think we're going to get in Student Opportunity Act money. I thought 21 million. I was wrong because there were significantly more students in economically disadvantaged status and L status. So we ended up getting 27 million. Overall, our money jumped 30 million, but 3 million of that is for the city to provide. So 27 million is what we're expected to get in Chapter 70 funding. The next slide is just the foundation enrollment. It's just showing you, as I explained in previous, at previous meetings, it shows the number of students in each of the categories. The key thing here is that the per pupil rate jumped from $16,103 per student last year. Now it's $17,692 per student. The next slide is the summary, which shows the $30.9 million increase for the foundation budget, and then underneath that you see that the city is required to do 3.1 million of that. I did reach out to the city CFO. They too just received their numbers last week, so they're estimating it's going to be a couple of weeks before they would be able to release the annual letter telling us how much of that will be in cash. So as you know, that could come to us, this $3 million increase. That means 60 million is supposed to come from the city. But of that 60 million, they could end up just giving us the 12.7 million that they have been giving us, or they could increase it by the growth factor that they had been using in previous years. But overall, the Chapter 70 is $27.7 million dollars higher than the previous year.
And that's the total right here, is that 228?
Yes, yes. 228.6 is the total Chapter 78, yeah.
So it includes the local.
Nope, it actually,
That's just state aid, and then there'd be the additional from the city.
right. So it's actually 288 of aid, 228 is from Chapter 70, and 60 is from the city. But as you know, that 60 could include charge-offs. The next slide is just a comparison. So I took the foundation budget from the two previous slides, and I put it side by side so that you could see why we're getting significantly more money. So, for instance, we're getting 220 more students. We're getting $1,679 more per student. But if you look right above that, the 2 lines above that, we actually have 366 more ELL students from last year. And last year, there had already been a 350 student increase. So over the last 2 years, we've had an increase of over 700 students in the English language learner category. Then we also had a 517 student increase in economically disadvantaged. So of change, we got an additional 14.7 million of the 27 million is due to having all the economically disadvantaged students count. The amount that we get per student for economically disadvantaged has jumped up by $918. So we get $7,000 additional dollars for students in this category. But anyway, this page is just trying to show you side by side how many additional pre-K, how many additional special ed in-district, out-of-district, L, and economically disadvantaged students we have. The one thing I have to point out, and I'm glad I just remembered this, One thing that does not sit well with me that I have to look into is if you look at the bottom of the first section, it said we jumped from 66 vocational students to 357 students, and that resulted in a $4.8 million increase. I need to verify those numbers because to jump from 66 to 357 vocational students, I don't know if the new person that did the SIMS data, if they counted some students that shouldn't have been. I would rather find that out now and not use this $4.8 million. So I just want to point that out to you guys. The next slide is just showing that we have an estimated, our estimated annual increases must address obligations before new spending. So it's just showing you the balancing act between we get the additional Chapter 70, we get additional revenue because of enrollment increases, but before we do anything, we have to take care of district-wide initiatives, collective bargaining placeholders, contractual obligations such as transportation, health insurance, and other contracts, and then level service cost of enrollment. For instance, if we get 220 additional students, we have to make sure that we have enough teachers for those additional students as well. So in order to level service and make sure that every student has what they had the year before, we have to adjust for that. The next slide is just a quick summary, and it's been updated and will continuously be updated. This has been updated in the following packet. When I first did the Student Opportunity Act increase of $30 million, I wanted to show how it can quickly be eaten up. For instance, the Fair Student Fund and Pool increase, we think that it should be $10 million to account for the additional students and to give the schools about $2 million in additional spending power. But $8 million, at least $8 million, is going to be just to make sure we have enough teachers for those 220 additional students. The next cost pool would be staff cost increases of 11.5, strategic investments of 3.5, transportation rates. I'm not going to even read the amounts, being that they've already changed, and you'll see that in the next packet. But transportation rate increases, homeless transportation. Now that we went up 300% over the last couple of years in homeless student counts. So the transportation has been skyrocketing. Sick leave buyback for the last 5 years, instead of the 1.2 that we budget, it's been 1.7. We did not adjust the budget because we thought it was due to COVID that we were seeing such significant increases, but now that it's been 4 or 5 years that we're seeing the same 1.7 million, I think we should increase this. Copier investments, we definitely have issues with copiers, so instead of continuing to make the schools struggle, we thought it's time to go back to Jay Lang days and put a bunch of money into the copiers so that the schools don't face that. Health insurance increases, lease increases, after dark and early college promise, and out-of-district rate increases. Just so you know, the out-of-district rate increase for this year is 14%. So it historically is 5%. It's now 14% for all those schools. Anyway, the next, Exactly. The next slides are all in the next packet, so I'm just going to skip over all of this, being that it's just repetitive stuff and goes into the next packet. So now I'm going on to agenda item 2, which is Fair Student Funding Pool. The first slide is showing you the total budget landscape. This is the slide I'm on. Yeah. Oh, am I on the?
Cruising along.
Yeah, you're on the next.
I'm cruising along. Is that good or bad?
Okay,
I don't want to go.
Is this one? Is this the one?
Yes. I'm not. I don't want to. Be too fast. If you want me to slow down, just tell me. I just don't like to.
No.
Go over, but I do like the when you put redundant information in the package so that it becomes uniform. I mean, becomes common, and not people can know it. But I don't think I should have to say it and bore you over and over again with it. So here's the total budget landscape that I'm looking at right now. This is I'm trying to remind you that we not only have Chapter 70, city cash, revolving account balances, federal and state and local grants, and then ESSER. And although ESSER is part of the regular grants, I separated out being that it's so significant. But per this total budget landscape, you'll see that we are expecting $295 million. And of that, 228 million is coming from Chapter 70. I put the 12.7 million that we received this current year for city cash, but hoping that they'll increase that. We're still expecting 5 million to be used from revolving accounts. We are expecting 28.5 million to be used for ESSER. As I keep saying that when we don't spend as much as we expect in ESSER, I move it forward to the following year. So we had originally had year 2 as the $28 million. Well, I've moved forward the facilities funding that we did not start to spend. Because even when we start to go out to bid, if we commit everything for facilities now, even if we went out to bid and all of that with contracts, it's still going to probably occur in year 3 for the payments. The next slide is just the foundation budget comparison, which I already pointed out to you on the previous slide, which is showing you like the 366 additional L students, 517 additional economically disadvantaged students. It's just a way of showing you why we're getting the additional money that we're getting. The next slide is the ESSER updated spreadsheet. And so as you know, for the last couple of years, we've been doing year 1, year 2, year 3 to show you the movement and the reallocation of cost. For instance, I'll give a perfect example on this spreadsheet. We had originally anticipated spending $1 million in expanded high school transportation. We only ended up spending $350,000 of that. So I modified it on here so I knew that that money had to be freed up. I don't want to leave any money on the table and send it back to the state. So I estimated that's all we're going to spend for the following year as well. So anytime I saw any change, any spending that was less than what we thought, I would adjust it and move the funding forward. The things to point out here is that we're always reviewing our grants, and we always review the ESSER spending literally every 2 weeks just to make sure that we're making changes and don't leave the money on the table. That would be a tragedy in my eyes. So the next slide is just showing you that another thing that we do is review revolving account balances, because we did have a couple of years ago where we hit rock bottom as far as no money in there, but now we're actually at the ceiling. So we have to, 2 areas that we definitely have to watch closely is the food service revolving account balance. We do exceed, you're only allowed to have 3 months of expenses in that account, and that's 2.4. We have about $4 million, so I've asked the food service staff to tell me all of the investments that we need to do to upgrade kitchen equipment, refrigerators, heaters, all of the things, so that we have a plan. And then just so you know that anything over $5,000, when we're spending revolving account balances, I have to do a CapEx form and get permission from DESI before I can spend it. So I'm getting a plan from the food service people and submitting it to DESI, and if so, we'll start to spend down the revolving account balances. The other revolving account that I need to watch closely is the out-of-district tuition. So I can't leave more than the previous year's reimbursement. If I do, the city takes it as general cash. And that happened 3 years ago. So, go ahead.
Just a question on the revolving account, the food service revolving account. I think it makes perfect sense to make some kitchen investments. That sounds great. Would we be also able to build into our food service budget? I know we increased to like the max, per student cost, so we could improve the quality. Would we have any bandwidth within there to kind of take the next step to increase the quality that much more? I think it comes down to what we're purchasing. Yeah.
I actually can look into that. I think so we're already at maximum quality, but we could expand options, right?
Yeah.
So like, for instance, so they said even if we have the highest level of quality, we could actually say we're going to get all fresh vegetables instead of canned, so you can, there are still other ways, so I can find out. The only thing is that if, let's say we increase by $500,000, you see how right now I think where I said we're about 1.5 million over, or 1.6 million, well, we'd eat that up within 2-3 years, right? So the only problem with, we have to make sure that the cost, you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I guess what I'd say to that, and I think we'd certainly, we don't want to go crazy. I can appreciate that. But the fact that we've built up this 1.6 tells me that we could reasonably expect that we'd raise another extra, 1.6 the next year.
Usually I would say yes, because
Yeah.
that's what we've done since I've been
Right.
here, but what we did, because we did increase the quality, now, the first 3 years that I was here, we made, the vendor made sure that we had $1 million return. We're down to they're only guaranteeing a $200,000 return, because we had decided as a group that we care less about the return now, being that we have a healthy balance, and let's spend more of that on quality. So, but just so you know, I misphrased that. We don't just have the 1.6, right? We really do have 4 million.
Right.
1.6 is just the excess. So,
Right.
So we can do what you're saying, and I will look into it and find out.
Okay. I think if we could get some options, that could be, it could be an interesting way to, improve the quality, which I think is something we all want to do.
Just so you know, this is one thing that the quality does not necessarily just mean just the food itself, but even the experience, like signage, things like that. They were going to do something called a market refresh, and we were asking DESI to approve it, but they said you have to go, because you can't just use your current vendor, you have to go out to bid for it. So we have to come up with time to write the scope and do that. But it would be a nice investment. I think they were estimating the cost to be about $50,000 at the time, and that would be an across-the-board investment in signage, and so kids could see the options, and it would be interactive. So I'll look into that. Yep. The next slide is actually a placeholder saying insert final Fair Student Food Fund and Pool. I can give you the Fair Student Fund and Pool amount, but as you know, we're releasing tomorrow, so I'm still working all night tonight and all day tomorrow trying to make sure that we get that. We've done everything over the weekend. We tried to manually do what the algorithm does for us, but of course, there's not an algorithm doing it for us, so it's very, we're trying to double check and triple check the numbers before we release. So this will be updated, and when I present again, you'll have a summary that shows a side-by-side comparison for schools. We don't intend for any schools to lose, even if they had a decrease in enrollment. We're holding people harmless, being that there is funding. But right now, last year, the Fair Student Fund and Pool amount was $158 million, plus supplements, which gave us a school-based budget pool. So right now, if we're focused on the FSF pool amount, that's $158 million. We've committed $10 million, so it's $168 million for the Fair Student Fund and Pool. When I go through the rest of the algorithm tonight, if we find that some schools are losing money and we want to hold them harmless, this amount might fluctuate some. But that means of the $27 million of an extra Chapter 70, we want to take $10 million and give it directly to the schools. By the way, then we're not, because of the negotiations with collective bargaining, we did not increase the average the average teacher rates. Usually every year we update the average cost for a teacher, average cost for a para. We're not letting the schools take the burden of the raises because we don't know what that raise is. So we held that to be the same as last year with the placeholders in the budget for collective bargaining. So anyway, so $168 million is the estimated Fair Student Fund and Pool as of today. Like I said, by tomorrow, I'll have an exact number.
So we're talking about a total budget of about 290, Chapter 70, everything combined. And 170 is being distributed through the Fair Student Funding formula. So only 120 million is what's being used to pay for the guardrails, this many teachers, this many paras, this many principals.
The 168 million is what's being paid, for the principal, all that. All the other money is being for all the central office stuff, such as psychologists, speech therapists, health insurance, transportation, sick leave, all the things that are not schools. So one thing I can provide.
So the 120 is basically central office expenses and
but
like
still
social workers and.
Yes, social workers, substitute costs. What I can do, if you like, when you see your budget book
Yep.
and how it's divided by DESI function code, what I do when I build the budget is I do a column. I take the current year budget and I update it to what is estimated for next year, right? Mm-hmm. And then I take that amount and I divide it between centrally locked, supplements, and Fair Student Funded. So I can actually hide last year so that it's not too overwhelming, and then let you you could peruse it, seeing what, all those line items that you see and you approve during the budget process, you could see it and see which one of those are in the pool and which ones are central. Because it's not central office like administration, it's
Yeah.
all the things that are shared between schools.
Schools.
Like substitutes and
Because I thought the fair student funding was, and this is just the way it's being tracked, but I thought there was, each school had a base amount that covered so many teachers per so many students, so many paras, the principal, your basic administration, and then the fair student funding was the funding that went to the school-based committee. I don't know what we call those anymore.
school secretary.
Thank you, those. And they get to determine what they get spent on. Like, they get to determine a portion, which is the fair student funding amount.
Right. So the school site councils are taking the 168 million, but of that 168 million, let's be real, there's a lot of guardrails, right?
That's
So
what I'm
because
trying to
of-
figure out.
Right. So in truth, so it's almost, so when I said I could divide the budget for you, it would show centrally locked, supplements, fair student funding pool. But even within the fair student funding pool, really, it's not the full 168 that's under, like, they don't have autonomy over the full 168. Most of that is really tied up with, you must have a principal, you must
Right.
have, but, so does that answer your question?
It does a little bit. What I would like, what would be a helpful number would be what is actually being determined by the student, the
True flexibility.
okay, yeah, whatever that committee is. Like, what do they actually have control over? That, so if you could just break that out.
Okay, control.
Because, I mean, I think we all know that there need to be the guardrails in place, that they're the basics, but the fair student funding is meant to, they're meant to have control over that so that they can make a school-based decision about what they really need. So I'm just curious what the amount
Okay.
is.
I'm trying to, I'll give thought to it after. I won't delay us now, but I'm sitting here thinking, how do I do that? That's a good question, but I'll figure it out. So the next slide, and again, some of this is repetitive, so this slide on the weights is just saying to you that we kept the weights the same as last year. We did not want to complicate things. We want apples to apples eventually. Like right now, if everything was constantly changing because it was evolving and we were improving, right? But right now, we want to stabilize and keep keep the weights the same so that we can compare apples to apples. The next slide is just the fair student funding summary, and again, it's just a reminder that this first section at the top left is equity through weights. It's showing you and the people that do look at these that we don't just arbitrarily give a school a number now. We actually do plug in the projected enrollment by all those categories, and then we give them a weight. So every school is getting the same amount per student. It's just whether their projections fluctuate up or down. The second section is stability through baseline and transition policies. Again, just baseline is saying you must have a principal, you must have this, you must have that. That would cost this. And if when we give them the weights, they don't have enough to cover it, then we supplement them. And then the transition policy is so that no one loses money. So that's, that's stability. This right-hand side is transparency. It's trying to show a side-by-side comparison so people can see where their increases came from. Yes.
So this year with the per capita rate per student, these will go up per student because this is based on per student capita. Is that correct?
So some schools will not see an increase at all. Let's say there's a couple of schools that saw a 60-student decrease, let's say, right? If they saw a decrease, we're not going to let them lose money. We're going to hold them harmless through this stability, right?
But say if they stayed the same.
If their number of students stayed the same?
Exactly the same, due to the per student capita rate increasing. If it stayed exactly the same, would these amounts go up because the per student capita rate increased?
So let me answer this first, and then hopefully if this doesn't answer you, then I'll try another way. But what I'm doing is actually going to do a spreadsheet that shows every school what their current year weights are, current year baseline, current year transition policy, right? Then I'm going to do it for the next year using their new numbers. If someone stayed the same, you'll see whether they had an increase in their budget or if they stayed the same, or, you know what I mean? You're going to see a side-by-side comparison on it.
Okay.
So, because I can't, we did not increase you know, when you're saying per capita, I think I might be getting confused. You know how I said we didn't increase the weight? So let's say 5,300 is what we give a base weight for a student. We didn't increase any of the weight, so the actual amount we're given per student has not changed. But they may see an increase based upon the number of students they have in each of these categories.
Okay.
Especially with that influx of low income.
Right, the influx of low income, 517, and then 366 L students. So you're not going to see, if somebody stayed exactly the same as last year, same number of students, then they would not see an increase.
All right, and then that would just stay in the Chapter 70 funding and.
It would actually go to the other schools that actually were going to lose money because of their low enrollment. You know, we're trying not to let anyone get hurt, because here's the thing, I'll give an example. The STEM school, it's showing a 60 student decrease because they had a bubble. Well, I call it a bubble, but maybe I shouldn't use words that I don't know. But anyway, they had a couple of years where they had high enrollment. So right now they're showing a lower enrollment, right? But if they already just did major hiring last year and the year before, and they're trying to stabilize their school, and we go and slash them right now, then they have layoffs again, right? So we're trying to keep it stable as well. So a school that did not see an increase, some of that Chapter 70 investment that we're doing, the 10 million, might be going to those schools to help. But that one-page summary that I'm going to bring on at the next school committee meeting will show you every school and what happened to them. And just so you know, this sheet here, when I do present the budget, your budget book ends up having this for every one of the schools with like a note saying this school saw an enrollment increase and thus corresponding revenue, or this school lost, you know what I mean? So you'll see a little note on each of these pages.
Okay, I think when it's all together, it will make more sense.
Right. The budget book comes with all the details, but it's good for us to kind of show you as we go, just so that you start to get familiar with it. But if you ever want to come and meet with me to go over the budget numbers, like say, I wouldn't recommend this week because we're trying to tie the numbers out, but if you wanted to, we could go over it. The next slide is just trying to remind you about the guardrails and how we vet the budget decisions. So just to quickly remind you that we vet this through the school site council process. We present to central office departments and staff. We're going to have teacher forums, parent forums, community forums, student forums, finance subcommittee meetings, school committee presentations, and public budget hearings. And just so you know, I've been doing this for 25 years, and I actually had to say to the superintendent, I am out presenting so much. I need to actually do the budget. So when I say that we really are vetting the budget and getting people to, we're giving them the opportunity to give input. So we did have over 400 people last year participate through the surveys or the presentations that we provided. The next slide is just trying to remind you about how after we go through all of the individual budgets, I then roll it into that main budget document that you end up seeing and voting on. So each time when you look at that one document, every one of those cells requires me to do a project, right? Or it's a roll-up of multiple school site budgets. So that's all rolled into the presentation that you get in May. And then just as we've done in past years, we say so that people in the public know, why not more? And that, so of the 30 million, 3 million is coming from the city, which again, we don't know if it's cash or not. But of the $27 million, we have to earmark a lot of that money for uncontrollable cost increases like health insurance, transportation, bargaining, step increases, and raises to out-of-district tuition. But again, we wanted to remind you too that the ESSER funds covered 3 years of addressing the learning loss, but it's earmarked specifically for certain eligible costs, and I cannot spend it on just anything. And the other spreadsheets are just from a summary of everything else that not spreadsheets, but the other things, the other Fair Student Funding summaries are just reminding you about weights, baselines, and transitions, which I more or less said the same thing in previous slides. So, and last is the important to note thing that Joel likes me to remind you guys of is that I can do anything, but I cannot do everything. And just to remind you also that the SBB pool, and the central office controls for, supports for schools like psychologists, social workers, substitutes, plus supplemental budgets. All of that is what we're going to present in our overall budget. The last item, and we're not going to do, I believe we don't need to do this now, but the school committee needs, we always say that the school committee, we would like them to vote on the Fair Student Funding Pool, but I think we've done that in regular school site. Right, and we don't need that to proceed. Like, I can release the budgets tomorrow. It's just a way of making sure that we're with you all along so that we get the input from the school committee. So this last item, action item sheet, I guess we could bring this forward to the school committee so that it is just still a formality that we get a vote. But do you agree that I can still submit, I mean, not submit, but share out the budgets tomorrow?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, good. Thank you.
Madam CFO, you know, every year we talk about bad. Oh no, I don't want to use the word bad. that kind of bills. So so every year we have that, and we have to deal with it, and nobody wants to hear it. Is there any way we can create a line item and say, hey, this year, look at all these years, you know, we have, I don't know, just throw a number, $1.5 million of money that contribute to that. Can we just set aside and say that bill is that line item, and if so that we can anticipate for the budget? Would that be legal if we can do that? Or?
I'm going to ask because that's actually an excellent idea. I know that when I was here back in the 90s and early 2000s, when we would have like whatever the surplus was, it was used to pay all the bills that came in after. So again, we've had 4 auditors since I've been here, but what I could do is work with, can we create an account to pay late bills and fees? How about that? Yeah, I can find out, but just so you know, there's a couple of things. So when you look at a year-by-year comparison, it might look like we haven't improved, but we did, because we went down to only a $1,000 bill that was done wrong. The other ones are because of new problems that occurred because of the new laws with the McKinney-Vento, and then with the with new auditors coming in, and then the purchase orders being canceled. And not to say it's the auditor's fault, because it could have been just a breakdown in between. I don't know if someone didn't point out that it should stay open. I don't know exactly how it happened. I just know that it was done right, and then they were closed prematurely. But I'm going to find out if we can create an account. Can we create an account to pay the delayed bills? And then there was something that I was just going to say about, I also am going to speak to the new auditor, and Christine O'Connor and I, we never got a chance to actually do it because it's been chaotic with the pandemic and all, but with the new auditor, solicitor, or her first solicitor, I'm going to ask this. The law, if you read the law, and I'm not a lawyer, but it says, when you have a bill that did not have an appropriation, we never said we didn't have money. So the way I interpret the law is you have to go in front of city council when you need them to pay our bill. But we don't need them to pay our bill because we still have the money, we still have an appropriation, we have funding. So I'm going to get an interpretation and see if they can, I'm going to resend what I sent to Christine on that and see if we can get some feedback. I'm not sure if we can because she may be busy too, but maybe Corey Williams, if he has an opportunity to look at it. But I'm going to try to find a solution, but this is a good idea.
I also ask a question. I know you mentioned earlier you're going to definitely put money aside for the copiers. I've heard this has become like a major issue with the schools. Like they're in desperate need of copiers, and like.
So not to sound like I'm making excuses, because I'm not. I just take this as a matter of fact statement. Not. We actually have been working really hard to solve the problem, and unfortunately, because of when we switched to a new company, because the last company we had was problematic, so we got the new company. Their machines, they said they were high volume, right? But what they didn't tell us is that they're only going to have one draw, and so a teacher has to stand there. And so there's not before you could fit 4 reams of paper, now you can only fit 1. Then the company had their factory blow up in Japan, right? So their factory blew up, so we could not get toner, and then it caused, with all the nationwide shortages on all of this, no one was able to help us. So we got Canon in because we learned that even though we're legally bound to continue working with that vendor until they break the contract, and we've tried to prove that, we've tried to document it all along the way, we have decided to supplement with Canon. But one thing, I'm teaching a CAGS course, the grad course with the teachers, and one thing I had them do as a project is to give me a problem of practice and then tell me what impact it has on them and what solution it has. And out of the 30-something students, I think like 12 of them wrote on the copiers. So the good news is that and just so you know, when we legally had to let the old vendor know that we want you to take these machines back, we're not legally bound to work with you on these machines, so take them back, but we'll, in 90 days, they came the next day and took it. They were being passive aggressive and came the next day. Usually a vendor would want to get that 3 months of additional revenue, but they didn't. They came the next day, so we didn't expect that. We also had no legal.
Like you were being repossessed.
Yes. So my point is, when I say that we're trying to correct these issues, but when I said about investing, I don't want to just invest in bringing us to the status quo. I want to actually give schools more. So we sent out a big survey to all staff, not just principals this time. So we sent out a survey last week based upon the feedback I got from the teachers. We want to know, is it the quality of the machines that's impacting you, like they jam up, things like that? Is it the location of the machine? Because some schools, they're saying the machine is in the main office and they can't access it. Is it that, so what is exactly the issues? And then we'll solve it. We're working to solve it. It's just not something that can happen overnight. But we really are like doing everything we can to gather the information and correct it. Every time we think we've corrected it, then we learn something else. So, but I can keep you updated on that. One thing Ms. Martin, you had said that you wanted an overtime report. So one thing we're going to start doing so that we all start knowing, we're going to do a monthly report on here's what we pay monthly on payroll, here's what we pay monthly on overtime, and here's services. And then if you start to see that monthly, you'll start to know just off your hand, oh, we pay $21 million a month in payroll, and we pay $4 million in overtime. Why did it jump up to $6 million this month? You'll start to understand it. So when you request things like that, it kind of gives me an idea of what I should offer monthly. So even the copiers, I can do a continuous update on that to keep you, where we stand with it if you need.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, and I don't know if this is possible. I know a lot of teachers have gone above and beyond to spend their own money and get their own, printing services, and I don't know if there is a way to even help them to get reimbursed for any expenditures that they've had to make on their own. And I'm just throwing this out there. I'm not even sure, but I know that I've known of a few that have gone out and had to even purchase their own printers to just get things done because of the weights. And I know every school is different. When you say you're doing the survey, I think that's good because every school is different. It could be location, it could be where they are, or you know what I mean, or it could be an array of different things at the different schools. But I think you're going to do it right this time. It sounds like you're not going to mess around with it. But I just wanted to maybe throw that out there overall.
Well, just so you know, one thing is that City Hall has actually started to deter us from allowing teachers to get reimbursed. So I don't know if that would be a possibility, but so I don't know how we can correct the people that have invested on their own up until now. But what we can do going forward is make sure that they have, say for instance, one of the teachers that I had in my class said that they can't put it anywhere but the main office because they don't have the network capability. And I said, but right now we have the money for an electrician. So right now, while we have the money, tell me what the problem is and we can pay for that and correct it. So that's what I mean when I say nothing's instantaneous, but we do need to correct it. They should not have to stand in line and have the machine, they explained that when they're waiting in line, that's all time that they're supposed to be prepping. And it was really...
but you have the luxury of having them in your class, right? Right. But if you didn't have that,
I would not know.
You would never know,
no.
Right? And connect those dots. So I think those teachers are so lucky to have you as their teacher. But and for this to be their project too right now. But, and I think that's the mode of communication in situations like this right now, like maybe like a copier portal, like what's going on and where. So like you can troubleshoot it as soon as possible, or something to that effect. You need Wi-Fi here, electrician, like what do you need so we can get this working? Something to that effect, and have someone monitor it. You know, like DoorDash or something, like the orders just keep coming in.
Well, I have a new deputy CFO that started today, and I actually said that's one of her main tasks for right now. I never thought copiers would be one of them, but you know what, we need to, when there's a problem, you need to address it. You can't just tuck it underneath the rug. But just one thing, like you said about the teachers, it is great to have that interaction between me and them, because I actually hear it, and then it motivates me to work even harder to help them. So we decided we're going to do a quarterly like Zoom with teachers, that anyone wanting to check in and just share operational finance issues. Like one of the things they brought up is payroll, that they don't know how many days they have. It's not on their pay stub, and other school districts have it. So all of these things, we get to hear it and then address it with City Hall. And even though it may take a while, because you have to pilot the you have to figure out the problem, then pilot the solution. We're still working on it. We heard them. I want them to know they were heard, so we're going to do it quarterly with them.
Okay, I think that's good.
So are we done?
Yes.
Okay. So can we end? Okay. So I want to thank Ms. Martin for joining us today, and again, Eileen, thank you very much for making a quorum. So how important it is that we have this meeting, and so that Ms. Turner can continue with her next step. So can we have a motion to adjourn? And motion to adjourn by Ms. DeRossi, second by me, and motion meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.